Hello and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Serge. Joining me as always, we have Jer, Alex, and Liam. This podcast is brought to you by you, with your support over at the Patreon at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. Thank you very much for the support. We literally couldn't do this without you. Starting off as always, we have the best card you're not playing. Up today, we have Liam. Liam, tell me about your spicy secrets.
All right, so Serge, I've heard through anecdotal evidence that you dislike losing to 4 mana red sorceries that produce an 8/8 artifact creature that makes you your life total not be able to change, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Platinum Imperium one. All right, so the card I have to present for you all today is not a card I would play in every deck.
It's Metamorphosis, isn't it?
It's not. It's a tech card.
Okay.
Sweet tech card. This is Artifact Mutation. It's from a commander set. I think the second, not the most recent commander set, but the one before that.
Wait.
It has an original printing as well.
Yeah, but anyway, it's been reprinted. So this is red-green for an instant that says destroy target artifact. It can't be regenerated. Create X 1/1 green saproling creature tokens where X is the artifact's converted mana cost. So
Beautiful.
it's good. But here's the thing. It's a tech card, right? You want to play this card when there's a lot of artifacts, because boy is this bad when there's no targets. But
It's not
when
even
there
disenchant.
No.
Yeah.
There's a green-white one that hits enchantments too, if you were interested in playing both.
There's a blue-green one that returns creatures
That's true as well. That one costs 5 though. Much worse.
Wow, it's so narrow and so beautiful.
Right, so you've summed up this card precisely. It's really narrow, but if you get to cast this on, say, a Platinum Imperium, or just some 3-4 mana cost artifact.
You're winning that game.
Right, it's like a massive blowout. So this card's sweet. I like I said, I wouldn't play it in every deck, but if you're playing red-green aggro and you're finding you're playing against a lot of artifacts, or maybe you're playing Naya, something like that, your opponent's GT's got you down, well, turn their GT into 2 of your guys, and boy, it'll be good.
You sound like a snake oil salesman.
I have been told that before. I mean, I am wearing this hat, which can't be good.
Yeah, Liam may have found the LoadingReadyRun's secret stash of
Here's
hats.
what you do is you build red-green artifacts. And go with me on this journey. You cast this into your 2 or 3 drop, and you just get guys out of it.
Okay, even better.
Yeah.
We can play 5 color with this deck, with this card, and cast our Draco. Then we artifact mutation our Draco and make a bunch of 1/1s. Then you get your burn at the stake, and you I can't even do that much math. 16 times 3.
One more. I think
It's 48.
it's
What more?
Phyrexian Dreadnought with the sacrifice trigger on the stack. Cast this.
But you only get one
only
for it.
one. It's
Oh, no,
CMC.
it's power.
It's CMC. That's why Draco's so good.
Oh no.
Ugin's Nexus. You play your Ugin's Nexus, make 5 1/1s, take an extra turn.
Notably, you can target indestructible artifacts with this
That's true.
because it doesn't have to be destroyed to get it.
No,
it just
that-
says it
yeah,
can't be
that's
You
regenerated.
can target Darksteel Citadel and get
Yeah.
0.
Yeah. So we're joking a lot. I don't think that you should play this card in some kind of wacky combo deck.
yeah.
But yeah, if you're playing against a bunch of artifacts, let's say if you're just getting started in the format and you have a smaller metagame and everyone's got their deck and maybe one of your friends has put together this artifact deck with a bunch of ramp and that kind of thing.
Here.
Right, and you want to put more cards in your deck to beat them. Well, after the sort of first 3 or 4 cards, like your Reclamation Sage,
A Braid.
maybe you're a Braid, something like that. Well, maybe
Revelry.
If you want to go 4 cards deep in your artifact hate, you put in that artifact mutation.
I'm not even sure it's 4 cards deep. It's this is a bigger blowout if you know you're going to be able to cast it.
Yeah,
so you put this in
that's
over
fair.
one of the ones that's maybe modal. So you put it in over a Braid, or you put it in
All right,
over.
10th Street Hooligan. We're not hedging today. We're just going ham.
Right, exactly. But anyway, this card's cool.
very spicy.
If you play it, it'll probably produce some kind of sweet story. Good Lord, Alex, you shrunk. All right, but that's what I got. Is
Cool.
Artifact Mutation. Try it out.
Well,
Seems fun.
Excellent. Thank you for your secret tech. No, I actually think that's pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah.
joking aside, that seems dope. But it segues nicely into today's theme. So today's theme is let's talk about aggro. And so you're talking about red-green aggro decks or anything like that. So let's talk about aggro. What is aggro? How do you play aggro? Why would you play aggro? And let's start it off with a definition of what aggro looks like in a 100-card singleton with Jer.
So aggro in a 100-card singleton is almost always creature-based decks with very low converted mana cost creatures that look to get on board early and pressure your opponent's life total as fast as possible.
Cool. That seems pretty straightforward.
Wow, that was remarkably succinct.
Yeah.
Get him.
I mean, it's Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward archetype. It's often recommended to people who are new to the format, and it's not because it's easier to play. It's because the decisions you have to make are
Well, they're clearer.
clearer. Yeah, easier is the wrong word, because you're playing a very linear deck that wants to do pretty much the same thing regardless of what your opponent's trying to do.
Yeah.
You're just trying to count to 20.
Well, there's an interesting part about that where it's, do I need to play answers? And often the answer in an aggro deck is no. Your answer is just kill them before it's relevant.
Your answer's more gas.
The hardest things in aggro are often doing combat math against mid-range decks and choosing when to play around certain things from control decks, like whether to play this creature that maybe takes a turn off your clock but overextends into Wrath, or like maybe like choosing not to play a creature and then they have a removal spell end of turn.
The classic, do I use this bolt to hit them in the face or kill their creature or kill their planeswalker?
Yeah, exactly. So like
that's a pretty interesting choice.
And it's interesting because the choices you make with aggressive decks often seem innocuous, but the difference, like aggro is a game of inches. The difference between winning a game and losing a game is often 1 or 2 life points, and it's like watching a really good aggro pilot is super interesting because they'll make some decisions and you're like, why did they make that choice? And then you see them win the game when their last card and they're putting their opponent to exactly 0, and you're like, oh man, that choice they made 3 turns ago to sacrifice half their board mattered because they drew these exact 2 cards, and like,
how'd they know?
So I suppose aggro is kind of an archetype that's easy to pick up but still has a lot of depth.
Well, it has a massive
like
skill
it's
set.
not as shallow as you would think.
With aggro, I think one of the things that's important is you do make fewer decisions, but that's just because the game's shorter. It's not because the deck is easier. Well, it's true, right? Like in an average aggro deck, you're ideally looking to only play 4 turns of Magic.
Yep.
And so there's just not that much room for choice in 4 turns of Magic, which means each decision you make is actually way more important. One mistake in aggro can often just end the game, whereas one mistake in control or mid-range,
might be able to stabilize,
you can maybe recover. But if like Alex brought up, maybe you point the bolt at the wrong thing, you might not get a chance to recover from that error.
That's kind of neat.
Yeah, so I think aggro is a good deck to pick up if you want to learn, but it's also a deck that if you practice it, you're gonna know, like, it's not easy.
And I think the biggest difference between new aggro pilots and experienced aggro pilots is they'll know when to play their outs and when to, like, where to point the bolt. Like,
there's always the joke about the, like, turn 1 lightning bolt pass. And you're just like, it's interesting.
Classic blunder.
Well, maybe, right? And you're just like,
yeah, right. It's like maybe that's actually the correct play.
You have like first person who's played Magic for the first time, turn 1 bolt, and you're just like, maybe somebody at the Pro Tour first 1 bolt, and you're just like, it could be the exact same play, and based on what math they've done.
There are certain matchups where you just need to, it's just a straight race from turn 1, and so if lightning bolt is your most proactive turn 1 play, you got to use your mana efficiently in a race, so sometimes you got to do it. Yeah. But most of the time, it's not.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about why would you play aggro?
Well, I mean, we're jumping ahead on the cube.
No, it's fine. Like, it's where we're in the conversation, so I figured these are just our speaking notes.
You want to really get people?
Yeah, I do.
Like, you want to just...
Okay.
Aggro's really fun because, like, you get to power these threats in a big hurry and you pressure your opponent's life total very quickly. And the games where you win feel really good because there's games where you crush people and it's amazing, and then there's games where you win by, as Jeremy said, by an inch, and you feel like $1 million. It's like, winning a matchup with aggro where you're kind of the underdog is incredibly satisfying. To just sort of like beat the odds,
In previous matches, we talked about what does your deck want to do. Mm-hmm. So combo can be kind of tricky, and you're going through like 1,000,001 different lines and trying to put pieces together. Control's tough because you're like, when is it time to put down the gas? Where is it time to try and just like stabilize and get my game plan going? Aggro is the deck that's just like, I always know what I want to do, and that is kill my opponent as quickly as possible. Yeah. It's just like streamlined and laser focused to one thing. And so if you're looking for a clear, consistent, proactive game plan, go aggro.
And I think the consistency is a key point to sort of key in on here, which is that aggro decks are by far the most consistent. You get to play the most redundant spells in aggro decks. And so game to game, you're going to have the most draws that feel not the same necessarily, but feel similar.
Or like within the same game plan, because like most of your games are going to be like 1-drop threat, 2-drop threat, 3-drop threat, or like 1-drop, 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 and you're getting out a reasonably predictable amount of power within a certain predictable number of turns.
Yeah.
To crack into your opponent.
Yeah, the strategy is very fast, and it's if you're looking for a deck that is gonna do the same thing virtually every game, like that can be very powerful, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the one other reason I think it's good to play aggro is that there are gonna be nights where you bring aggro and you just get a bunch of free wins, right? Because aggro is one of those archetypes where if people stop respecting the fact that it exists, and you have all these mid-range and control decks being like, oh, I'm going to beat the other mid-range decks, I'm going to go a little higher on the curve, and then the control decks are like, the mid-range decks are going higher on the curve, time to go higher on the curve ourselves.
I can go even
and then
slower.
People are like, well, I don't need this early game removal, I need ramp spells to get higher on the curve faster. And then you show up with red, green, Sligh, and people are looking at their hands of like rampant growth and their 5-drop planeswalkers.
Horse just like, I will be dead before I cast this wrath.
And you're like, well, I'm going to kill you on turn 4 every game that we play. If we played 100, I would probably only fail to do so once.
I mean,
Sure. I'm exaggerating here. But you really do, occasionally the metagame just becomes ripe for aggro, and it's definitely the one that gets the most free wins when the meta is ripe for it.
I also like deck building for an aggro deck, I think it's the easiest way to sort of visualize what deck building is, because we go back to Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt, 3 damage, 1 mana, and you're like, okay, how many times can I get that in a deck? And then so you start doing the math on that, and then you run out, and then your next question is, do I have creatures that can give me the equivalent of 3 damage for 1 mana, or do I have to go to a burn spell? So do I go 2 damage for 1 mana, or 3 damage for 2 mana? And you start doing all this math, and you start going again, like, all right, my plan is to get them as dead as quickly as possible. Let me take turns, mana cost, curve, and just start crunching these numbers. And then you start, it's a really fascinating deck building judgment, because normally if you're doing mid-range or control, you're like, all right, how do I survive? So this is my early turns, and I try and like, this is my setup kind of thing, and mid-range is like, maybe I'm wrathing, or maybe I like accelerate into something early, and then like, here are my win cons. Aggro is just like, nope, just gas pedal, go.
Yeah, you're assembling the leanest suite of spells imaginable. So it's like, how can I nug my opponent the hardest and pay the least for
Every
it?
turn.
It's really interesting though, because there are definitely different ways to build aggressive decks, even the most linear seeming ones. Like, Jer, I'm sure you can speak to this. Like, your build of mono red versus Sam's build of mono red versus Colin's build of mono red.
They're all very different.
Super different and all effective in different ways, and they're all really interesting.
Definitely. Yeah, so...
Because there is still lots of wiggle room for deck building.
Yeah, like all our decks probably differed by 20-ish cards. Like Colin's known for playing more creatures. He plays lots and lots of 1-drop creatures, ones that Sam and I chose to issue for like some more efficient spells, usually maybe some more burn spells. Sam tends to play like really like the most burn spells. He'll play like the most shock type effects, which Colin and I both don't typically play.
And he plays like a lot of prowess creatures too.
Yeah, he's played Mage Ring Bully because he and like all the prowess creatures. He plays Abbot of Carol Keep, just to utilize all the cheap spells he has. He could
Play Film Fiend?
I don't think so. If he has
Not that deep.
if he has like a prowess creature in play, you'll often be taking like 2 or 3 prowess triggers off of it in one turn. And I tend to go a little bit higher on the curve and play a couple more lands. So I play more 3-drops and more of the 4 damage burn spells.
Who's on the ball lightning plan?
Jer, you've played it, right?
I've played it, but even I don't play it that much anymore.
Jer is also slightly advantaged in his building of mono red because you play the old Lotus mono red.
I play Black Lotus in my mono red. I actually think the best mono red point spread is Mox plus Black Lotus. Most people play Mox plus Strip Mine, and it's definitely a totally defensible point spread. I just think the deck is wants to be more proactive than reactive, and Black Lotus is a better proactive card than Strip Mine.
Well, I think this leads us nicely to our discussion on different types of aggro, and I imagine we're going to spend a bunch of time just talking about different decks, which are kind of sweet. So at a very high level, we have the red-based aggro decks, so Goblins, RDW, which is spending a lot of time on, and like red-based red-green Sligh. Then we have green-based aggro decks, so we have like green-red aggro, so green is the base color with red on the other side.
I hate to cut in. Can
Yes.
you go over what Sligh means?
Yeah,
It's a guy's name.
Is it?
It actually is, yeah.
Yeah, Liam, take it off. Talk to us about Sligh.
So red-green Sligh, basically the idea behind like a Sligh deck is you're playing like an early creature or two, and the very early versions of these decks would be like play 1 or 2 drop, have some burn spells, and actually they played land destruction as well. So it would be like 1 drop, 2 drop, blow up your land, be a little disruptive, kill you. In the Highlander context, it now means some red-based deck that's splashing green is playing a bunch of cheap creatures and fewer burn spells is the distinction.
Yeah, more creature based
My
than.
understanding of Sligh was that he was sort of the person who kind of discovered the idea of a mana curve.
Yeah.
Definitely.
At least specifically for aggro.
Yeah.
The idea of just like play, because he would play these cards that were like kind of not as good, but they were just on curve.
Yeah, they were curve cards.
Yeah, the idea is that your mana curve has more value than any synergy, and you can even tolerate having non-bows in your deck, provided that you're always applying pressure based on your mana curve. It's the idea of Sligh. As much pressure per turn as possible.
It wasn't even just having non-bows. It was just like, you like look at it in blocks. I need 8 1-drops, so I'm putting 2 4-ofs, the best 1-drops in my deck. I need 16 2-drops, so I'm putting 4-ofs of the 4 best 2-drops in my deck. It wasn't non-bows. It was like he had a formula for how many things of each cost he wanted, and he just put the best ones.
It was a numbers game.
Yeah.
While we're explaining things, RDW
It was like Moneyball aggro.
Yeah.
Red deck wins.
is red deck wins, which is just like,
burn.
it's mainly burn.
So Goblins is synergy deck. Red deck wins is damage value deck. Graham, you're trying to hop in, or?
Oh, just for interesting trivia, Jay Schneider was the columnist who sort of created the Sligh principle, named after player Paul Sligh. So there you go. That's what we were just talking about. So I've now interrupted twice while you're trying to list the different types of aggro decks. So
we'll
go
through
for
really
it.
quick, and then we'll do a big explanation after we'll explore all the archetypes. Next up, we have green. So we have green-red aggro. So green is the base color, red is the splash. Naya and Jund are sort of classic green decks. We have white, so we have white Weenie, Death and Taxes, and Hate Bears. So a white X Hate Bears list. And then we have the black aggro decks. So we have just like mono black aggro and black mold, which is normally like black splashing green for something like that.
Potentially put Orzhov aggro, or as I like to call it, gray weenie in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that probably fits in the hate bears.
And I
Yeah.
definitely
the
think
white based, right?
Abzan aggro is a good deck
Yep.
as well. I've definitely played.
What color do you think it's based? Is it kind of hard 3-color?
Gotta be
It's
white.
it's
right?
pretty hard 3-color. You're like green white with black probably, but you're like
Yeah.
I feel like black is
Bant
probably
is
the
also
splash.
good.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
Bant is green based. It's like green white.
Yeah,
slash
well,
blue.
like any of the, I mean, that kind of falls under the categories we had there. Notably, no blue aggro.
Well, all right.
All right.
No. So I made the list and received quite the chewing out from Jeremy because there is a blue based aggro deck.
Is there?
Well,
See,
no,
sorry.
it's not actually playable. Look, this is Jeremy's
Not playable?
It's Jeremy's mono white mid range.
No, it's not.
It can't be mono white.
It's
and
much
It has
better.
Sea Drake in it. You can't win games with Sea Drake in your deck.
Challenge accepted.
All right, play it this Monday.
All right.
I have a hot deck swap planned for Monday. I'll play it on Thursday.
I have a couple questions here. First off,
Excuses.
Little Flying Men. Is that an aggro deck or is that a tempo deck?
It probably is. All right, fine. Mono blue flying man. That's a reasonable aggro deck.
Secondly, we were forced to acknowledge that Merfolk might be a viable archetype in Highlander now. Is that tempo or is that aggro? That's probably tempo. It plays a lot of.
It's actually it's kind of close. It's because I think the reason that deck was good was not the like dirtily merfolk aggro curves.
Is the amount of winter orbs it plays.
Yeah, it was like the winter orbs and the turning your lands into islands.
Yeah.
So it's an LD deck.
Well, sort of. And then like the Stoneforge Mystic was pretty good in that deck. So like maybe it's
Yeah.
white based.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of these decks. Let's start with red. So we've talked about Sligh. We've talked about red deck wins, both of which focus on damage per turn in a very sort of like mathematical context. Let's talk about Goblins. So Goblins is a big format staple in Highlander, and I love that it plays as big of a role in our meta as it does.
I mean, it's one of the 2, maybe now 3 tribal decks that exist and actually work in our format. That being goblins, elves, and now maybe merfolk.
It's also one of the most like budget, or it can be one of the most budget-minded
It's
lists.
not expensive and really, really good.
Yeah, and it's only gotten cheaper as time has gone
Yeah,
on.
it-
Like
it's
they've reprinted
also-
a bunch of the really key cards.
It's also arguably more interesting than just like mono red
Yeah.
because you have. I mean, that it depends on the
You
player.
have you have more things happening.
yeah.
One of the most troll things I've seen in the community is when a new player comes out and somebody's like, hey, does anybody have a deck they can lend? And goblins, there's always a goblin deck around. Someone's like, yeah, you can borrow my goblin deck. And they pick it up and they're like, what's this Chinese foil card that I've never seen before ever? And you're like, oh,
Yeah,
right.
Alistair Norman lending his Goblins deck. to
Yeah,
everyone.
because it's such a
like
cheap
largely
deck
not
that,
in English.
that sometimes the Highlander players will go out of their way to acquire either like full art versions of card or foreign printings of card, and then you're like, it's such a simple, straightforward deck, take it. And you're like, I can't read a single one of these cards.
What
It's
is this?
Even in English, lots of people don't understand what the Goblins deck actually does. Like when you have Goblin Sledder in play,
Tobogganista.
yeah,
Oh man,
or
that's how tight it is.
or
Graham, what's
Mog.
up?
Well, just what does the Goblin deck do?
Oh, a reasonable question.
Yeah, the Goblin deck is a go wide aggro deck that relies upon either cards like Goblin Sledder or Mog Raider, which are 1 mana 1/1s that can sacrifice a creature to give target goblin +1/+1 until end of turn, or Lord effects, creatures.
Like Goblin King.
Or sorry, sacrifice a goblin, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I got it backwards. Or lords like Goblin King, Goblin Chieftain, Adaptive Automaton, Metallic Mimic.
Yeah, it's got a lot of lords.
Yeah, those types of things to just pump up the team,
And then just make a ton of tokens.
yeah, make a ton of tokens with either the 2-drop, make 2 1/1 goblins, the 3-drop Hordling Outburst, or the more common one is Mog Alarm, 1
Oh,
red,
man,
red,
that's secret tech. Don't tell anyone.
sack 2 mountains, make 2 goblins.
We're only here to tell people
There
about secret
are
tech.
so
guys.
Yep.
so many ways to make multiple goblins for not much mana,
Yeah,
and
so it's like creature-based go-wide synergy.
yeah.
So my problem with the Goblin deck is they all kind of look the same. And so I see this 1/1 Goblin for 1 on the battlefield, and I'm like, all right, I can ignore this one. And like, that was Mog Flunky. Here's like my amazing Goblin flavor. I'm like, oh, this is so frustrating. You're like, okay, I kill this Goblin. And they're like, I sack it and add a red man. I'm like, what are all these Goblins? And they have just so many interactions together. It's you can describe it at a high level what it does, but as soon as you start trying to get down into the details, it just has so many play options, so much synergy, just such a density of cool cards to do stuff that it, again, we said it's one of the few tribal decks that really works because it has so many options going for it.
Goblins is interesting too because mono red is like very consistent. It's always going to do the same thing basically every game because its cards are largely redundant. Goblins has a lot more like peaks and valleys. You're going to have some draws with goblins which fall a little bit flat if maybe they interact with your key lord.
Sure.
But then you're also going to have the like Warren Instigator connects and you get to put in like Goblin Chieftain plus Krenko. Yeah, exactly. Like you are just going to have these like absolutely filthy turns. So there's like definitely like the higher blowout potential in goblins. The other thing about goblins that's worth noting is that there are much fewer burn spells in goblins.
Plays like Tarfire and Bolt and maybe Chain Lightning.
Goblin Grenade.
Right, yeah.
Oh,
It'll also
How'd you
often
like to
play
do 5
Reckless
damage for
Abandon and of course Price of Progress.
Yeah. But
And
like
Fire Blast.
it's worth mentioning there was a time where Tim McInnes, or Mac, the Goblin King, was so dominant in our meta with 0-point goblins. He wasn't playing any points that we started struggling trying to be like, we have to point something in this deck. We can't stop it. He's not playing any pointed cards. What do? We thought about pointing Goblin Recruiter.
We did.
Yeah, we tried
was
pointing.
four.
We tried pointing Price of Progress. We tried pointing Wheel of Fortune, and we're just like, this is not sending the right idea to the rest of the meta. And it's just like, I guess the meta has to adjust to beat goblins because pointing it was just not correct.
So people should have started playing Power Stone Minefield.
Or just Pyroclasm. Like, there's a lot of ways to hate
Or
out the deck.
Obstinate Baloth.
Kitchen Finks.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of answers as the meta has evolved. So again, red-based aggro decks, fantastic. There's a couple of examples, like massive staples in the format, and you kind of always have to know You always have to be wary of a red deck. If your deck is
It's going to kill you fast.
Yeah. You just have to be aware when you're deck building that A, you have an answer to red, or B, you just hope to avoid red.
Yeah, I mean it's another barometer of the format, right? Is like, or when you're building your deck, you have to be like, all right, well, what's my plan against mono red? Because you're very likely to play against it
Yep.
On any given night.
Yep. Let's look at green-based aggro decks. So we have green-red aggro, and then sort of like green-based 3-color ones that can go in any sort of direction. What sort of sets that apart from the red decks?
Creature quality is real high with green.
Yep.
Whereas something like red, the creatures are like in red deck wins, a lot of the creatures are sort of disposable. Where for, the perfect example is like ball lightning. Like it hits super hard and then it's dead.
Once. It hits you once.
You know, there's cards similar to that, like Keldon Marauders and like Hellspark Elemental and stuff like that. This is all stuff that is designed to output as much damage as quickly as possible, but none of it lasts.
They're burn spells that oopsed onto a creature.
It's a sprinting deck. Green-based has more sort of like mid to potentially long game sort of holding power. Because you play these threats that are really big and they stay big. I mean, Tarmogoyf is a good example. It's just like, I'm not going to pay enough mana for this 3/4 or 4/5. Oh, no, it's getting bigger. It's taking over the game.
In Naya, classic examples are like Wild in the Cattle.
Yeah.
So Wild in the Cattle is a single green mana for a 1/1. But if you control a plains, it gets +1/+1. And if you control a mountain, it gets +1/+1.
So, yeah, you slam this next to a plateau, and it's a 3/3 with 0 downside.
And then the other one is Nipple Mongoose. Am I thinking of that
No,
one
there's
correctly?
Loam Lion and Curd Ape, which
Sure,
also get
yeah,
pumped by
yeah,
these sorts
yeah.
of things. So there's kind of two different types of green-based
Ooh,
aggressive
yeah,
decks. There's the Mana Dork green-based aggressive decks. So these are things like Bant aggro, where you're trying to play like a mana accelerant into some really powerful 3-drop.
And then give it a sword.
And Abzan is definitely falls into this as well. Yeah, you're playing lots of swords. And then there are the 1-drop focused green-based aggro decks, and these are things like Naya and Jund. So Naya has the best 1-drops. I think you can pretty.
They're pretty crazy.
Yeah, they're all like very good. And then Jund, the reason you play Jund is you get a similar quality of 1-drops. The black 1-drops are worse than the white 1-drops.
Yeah.
But black gives you a little more disruption.
Yeah, you can hand attack.
Yeah, so Jund aggro, a little more resilient. You also get to play the Juice, which is pretty good.
The Juice!
Dread
Get up!
Mangler.
What? Dread Mangler? I figured...
Dread Mangler.
There's
So
a
this-
second Dreg Mangler now.
Yeah, Morn Willow.
Oh my goodness.
You get to play,
Juice.
Dreg Mangler and Mornwiller, and
So-
they're both great.
So this is the nickname. Jared, why is this card called the Juice? I
So-
actually don't know. It predates
Yeah, me neither.
I've
So
never heard this.
yeah, it's a local nickname for the card. We were playing it in the pre-release, and one of the best limited players, I'm like pretty convinced in North America, John Rickard.
Oh, he's really good, Jono.
Yeah, he makes good players look not good. He was playing it, and he's like, he like had 2 in play, and he's like, oh man, this card's the Juice. And he was just like getting his opponent real good with these cards.
To briefly recap for those of you listening, the card we're talking about is Dreg Mangler, which is 1 green-black for a 3/3 with haste, and Scavenge for 3 black-green. You can exile it from your graveyard to put 3 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control.
Yeah.
It just like gets in really fast, really hard, and then when it's dead, it can be value later.
Yeah. And so he just called it the Juice then, and I was like next to him and I'm like, yeah, that card is the Juice. And we both sort of laughed to each other. And then the next draft, I like slammed it, and like after the drafting portion was done, I'm like, first pick the Juice. And ever since then, it's like
the reason you play Jund is if you want to play the deck with the best nicknames. It has the Juice. It also has
Gary.
Spiky J.
Bob, Gary,
Sorry,
yeah.
Not Gary. No,
Yeah.
Gary's too
beautiful
big.
pig.
The Beautiful Pig, yeah, Flinthoof Boar.
Bob.
Beautiful Pig!
Yeah.
Oh,
man.
Boar is the Beautiful Pig.
We
And then
forgot about-
Spiky J, which is Spike Jester.
No. We forgot about Teamer. Nothing is better than the elbow.
Yeah, the Papadusco special.
The Papadusco special. What's the name of that monkey? The team
Savage
monkey.
Savage Knuckleblade. Yeah.
That card is the epitome of aggro. You just look at this monkey's face, and it's just coming to give it to you.
It's interesting, actually. Like Teamer aggro, not
Look at that card.
super widely played. Like Pat won a Monday with it.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody should.
He laboriously worked to make it work. And
Toiled, you say?
Toil, yeah.
And he
Well,
just,
he wasn't playing
dropped
that card.
those
It's-
Savage Knuckles.
He
Red
was
black,
kind of tempo-y.
He was a little more tempo-y. So this is the issue with Rug is that no one has. I mean, in fairness, no one has really tried. So there's definitely design space here where you could make a Rug aggressive deck. The blue, like one of the colors, is going to feel out of place. Basically, I think is the
Yeah.
problem I've always had when trying to build this deck.
Definitely.
I've tried playing red, green, splash blue for power. So I played red, green, splashing Time Walk. That was okay, but it felt a lot of times like I just wanted to be red green. I've tried being blue red splashing green for pump spells, and the blue felt a little underwhelming. I once tried to not Blossoming Defense, Vines of Vastwood by Phantasmal Bear.
Oh no.
That didn't,
Unadvisable.
That didn't go well for me. Phantasmal Bear is a 1 blue 2/2 that has the phantasm ability.
I don't
where
know, maybe like red green splashing for Edric is hot.
I was playing that card in my deck as well.
Well, I don't know.
So to go back to Jund for a second, actually, I think the biggest reason to be Jund is you get the best haste creatures.
Yeah.
Which is a really
Astonishing how many haste creatures are in like
A
black,
really-
green, and red.
a really big deal when you're playing aggro is that often forcing people to interact with you at instant speed, or else they're just gonna take 1,000,000 damage is a huge deal. Lots of
Spiky J.
lots of decks try to interact with you at sorcery speed through wraths or destroying your creatures with planeswalkers, or just the removal they chose is like more widely answered. You can punish them by playing Jund aggro. If people are playing lots of Maelstrom Pulses, Vindicates, Council's Judgments, they're trying to be really
Flexible with their removal.
yeah, flexible with their removal. They're not playing super efficient removal like Flame Slash, Lightning Bolt, Fatal Push. They're Abrupt Decay. They're being more flexible. You can really punish them with the haste creatures in Jund. You get the red hasty 1-drops. You get the red hasty 2-drops, and you get the most gold haste creatures. You get Spike Jester, you get Flint of Boar, you get Front Runner of Slaughter.
The juice.
Yeah,
The Juice, yeah.
the Juice, Dragmangler,
Baby
Morn-
Juice, Morn Willow.
Morn Willow, and then the
Baby
4
Juice
drop.
sounds kind of gross.
The 4-drop slot, you get maybe the two most impactful 4-drops. You get Falcon Wrath Aristocrat and Hellrider.
Choo choo.
You can also play Surak Huntcaller in this deck if you want to as well. The 5/4.
Are we just
Definitely.
not going to
Green,
talk
5/4.
about Bloodbraid Elf?
That
Bloodbraid
one
Elf
sometimes gets the axe.
Doesn't get in very often anymore.
Yeah.
It's too.
Too slow.
I don't believe you.
No, the problem is it's just not consistent enough. And at 4, you want this card to end the game for your opponent. If you play Hellrider, your opponent's just dead on the spot. If you play Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, you just played a 4-power flyer that your opponent can't remove. If you play Bloodbraid Elf, it's a 3/2 with haste, but
What if your Cascade whiffs?
yeah, what if you cascade into a 1-drop?
Like a Mana Dork? That sounds
Yeah.
pretty good. Oh,
Not even a Mana Dork. What if you just cascade into Rakdos Cackler? Like on turn 4, like that's fine, but
it's not.
But it's
There's-
not
It's
on the
not
level of the other
kill
ones.
you.
Interesting.
yeah, and like it has super high potential. Like if you cascade Bloodbraid Elf into Dragmangler, it's obviously
That's
Yeah, nuts.
It's
Yeah,
insanity.
yeah.
but like that's a pretty best case scenario, and you can just get a better consistent, like a better base case with playing other 4-drops.
So just before we move on to white-based aggro, the one other thing I want to say about the green-based aggro decks is these decks are most often creature-focused, and your removal gets used to make way for those creatures. Whereas in the red-based aggro decks, you're playing burn spells that also happen to double as removal, but most of the time they're going to the face.
Yeah.
There's the one other thing the green deck can get away with that a lot of the other decks aren't as good as, which is quickly accelerating into an Armageddon or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So like the Kata Blade deck, you play a Mana Dork into a 2-drop threat.
That's Bant.
Pardon me.
Yeah.
Into a sword or some piece of equipment on turn 3, equip, and then get in the board, and then just basically set your opponent so far behind because you got ahead of them that they can't recover from that. So
Yeah,
Armageddon
it's
or
real barbecue
Cataclysm
soup.
or something.
any green white based aggro deck is that's their game plan, is looking to accelerate mana as fast as possible, stick 1 or 2 threats, and then destroy all lands.
Yeah, just end the game, shut down the game at that point, and finish. Well, that's what we're saying. Our 4-drops are normally game over
Yeah, they
as
should be
much as
ending the game.
possible. All right, white-based aggro decks. So we have the 3 sort of big ones in this, notably our White Weenie, and we can spend more time exploring all of them, Death and Taxes, and then Hate Bears. And as a very high level, White Weenie is more of a go wide strategy, so play a lot of very cheap threats and an Anthem effect. Death and Taxes is an attrition style aggro deck. And in Hate Bears, actually, I'd like to explore the differences sort of between Death and Taxes and Hate Bears. And I think these are terms we've borrowed from Legacy. Jerry, do you want to take the point and tell me where one ends and the other begins?
So Death and Taxes is sort of a deck that often has mana denial aspects to it, either through taxing creatures like Thalia, lands like Rashadan Port, and other disruptive creatures. And they'll often play try to win the game by playing a flyer and either trying to like disrupt you a bunch by not letting you cast your spells efficiently and just chipping in with a flyer, or getting a creature with a piece of equipment on it.
So before you go to Hate Bears, can you talk about what Thalia is and what kind of disruption that is and how it affects the board?
Yeah, so Thalia is a 2-mana 2/1 with first strike for 1 and a white, and her text is non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. So it makes removal harder to cast. It allows you to go wider because it really forces your opponent to take extra time to cast their mass removal. It makes
it has
rats.
a profound effect, especially in the early turns, where it can mean the difference between your opponent casting 1 spell per turn and 2 spells per turn. So if they, have access to like 2 or 3 mana and they have like a 1-drop and a 2-drop, they have to pick
Which one they get?
which one they're going to cast. And it's like, I would really love to play both of these, but I can't.
Because of Thalia. All right, so that's an idea of Death and Taxes. Now, how does that differentiate from Hate Bears? Because you'll often see Thalia played in both this and Death and Taxes and Hate Bears.
Yeah, so there's definitely some overlap, but Hate Bears is a green-white based deck. Typically, you can play other colors, and it'll play some creature tutors, like Eladamri's Call, Fauna Shaman, typically.
Green Sun Zenith or something.
Green Sun Zenith.
Okay.
And it's looking to assemble a creature that almost by itself will shut down the opposing strategy. So like Aven Mind Sensor against Scape Shift, Gerak Teague against
Whatever.
Control. Yeah. Ethersworn Canonist against Storm.
Linvala against Pod.
Exactly.
One I had happen to me.
Interesting.
Linvala, Keeper of Silence against opposing creature decks.
Yeah. So this is interesting
Like a
because
toolbox, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
it's much more toolboxy.
one of the things that we were saying earlier in aggro is oftentimes you don't care about interacting with your opponent because you're trying to get their life total as much as possible. How do these white decks still classify as aggro when they're very much seeking to interrupt and disrupt their opponent?
So in order to compensate for the fact that the clock out of white-based aggro decks is usually a little bit slower, they're sort of forced to be disruptive. But the plan is still very similar, right? You're still looking to play the board quickly, lower their life total as quickly as possible. These decks are still not great going into the late game, right? I mean, once their opponent starts untapping with a lot of mana, they are still at the end of the day, they're playing 2/1s and 3/1s with flyers with additional text that do things, and there is some play to it, but it's a little difficult to operate in that late game. So you're still trying to end the game. I do think, in fairness, that the white-based aggro decks definitely slant the most towards turning into mid-range decks. Like I think you can still call them aggro decks as well, but they're definitely the closest. Where the previous 2 categories we talked about are get you, really like punch you in the face kind of aggro. The white-based aggro deck is like disrupt you long enough that I'm going to kill you with these threats. Other than White Weenie, which I think is just a pure aggro deck that's looking to play a lot of small creatures and then Anthem effects to go wide. Yeah, exactly. But there's sort of two ways to go with it.
Is the deck called Hate Bears just because Thalia and Gerak Teague are both 2/2s for 2? Because none of the other creatures you named were.
So there's cards like
Ethersworn Canonist is, and Leonin Arbiter, and
that's where the name comes from.
Imposing Sovereign.
There's a lot at 2.
Bear, i.e. like one in a color, 2 something.
X.
Usually 2 2s or sometimes 2 1s get slid in there that hate out a particular archetype. So it's like Phyrexian Negator is an honorary
Revoker.
hater. Or, sorry,
Revoker.
Revoker.
Yeah,
Negator not so much.
Negator, no
Revoker
good.
Tech, yeah.
is.
No.
I am not interested in Negator. Please no.
That's cool. Thanks. I was curious.
No worries. Yeah. Yeah. So your plan is play 2 drops that disrupt your opponent.
You guys good to move on to black-based aggro
I was
decks?
going to say, speaking of disruption.
Yeah, there we go. So we've got sort of the 2 categories that we have right now. One is the mono black aggro, the all-in aggro deck, and the other is a black and then splash another color black mold, which Alex has had quite a bit of success with on that one.
It's been
I mean, you're sort of the pioneer of that deck, right? Like,
The greatest flattery you can get in deck building is when people ape your list and then do better with it.
You forgot my workshop waiting list in aggro.
Oh no!
How could you?
We'll get that after.
Serge, don't worry about it. Someone else will play it eventually.
Matthew Greer!
Ow.
People have been brewing this list. They think it's sweet.
All right,
sweet.
we can talk about it last. Well, look, we're going in Wooburg order.
Yeah.
Colorless is last. We'll talk about the colorless deck.
Is this Wooburg?
It's no, but look, we established last episode or some number of episodes ago that my grasp of the English alphabet is like poor at best. So you got to cut me some slack here,
I
okay?
was looking at this, I'm like, I know we skipped blue, but I'm like, I'm pretty sure even without blue, it's not Wooburg.
So
Not even close.
black-based aggro
Yeah.
is, I guess it's sort of a go medium strategy because like it I don't know that it can go quite as wide as something like goblins or mono red or white weenie. The creature quality in black is actually not great.
Yeah, that's fair.
And it comes at a pretty heavy cost. There's a lot of very efficient, mana cost to power creatures, but most of them come with some sort of drawback.
Pretty big downside, yeah.
It'll be life loss, or they'll like do something bad.
You can't win the game.
You can't. Yeah.
You can't play.
Oh yeah,
creatures.
do you like Desecrate or not
I
Desecrate?
do not like that card at all.
No, I claimed your vote in Absentia. Sorry.
You don't like Abyssal Persecutor?
I hate it.
Oh, give me some.
There we go.
All right.
You haven't watched the set review episode, have you?
We're
All
a
right.
50-50 split
okay.
Damn it.
on the Abyssal Persecutor on this podcast. That's
I was trying to.
However, this is actually a good example of like black-based.
Right, so you're
aggro.
saying you could
My
play it
personal
in a
thoughts.
black-based aggro
Yes, you
deck.
can. My personal thoughts are that I don't think this card is that good.
So what is the Persecutor? Just
Abyssal Persecutor is 2 black for a 6/6.
Yeah, sounds
with
great.
Flying and trample.
That sounds amazing.
It has a
Card's gotta be
small
insane.
caveat.
Okay.
You
Large
can't win the game, and your opponents can't lose the game.
That is of minor consequence.
So what does
it's-
black have going for it?
It has effects like this, where you get way too much power and toughness for not enough mana, but it's always at a price. And
But
this is a perfect example of like the highest price you'll pay.
Yeah.
Like frequently it'll be life loss or some sort of other thing you have to do. But you do get to jam these creatures that don't cost enough mana and hit super duper crazy hard.
But the other reason why Persecutor is great is black has the best removal in the game,
It's
and it's
really
so
good.
easy to be able to kill your own Persecutor when they're at 0.
Or you could just kill your opponent's creature.
Yeah.
And play good cards.
But Serge is right. Like the removals get in black. That's
Yeah.
one
The
reason to
removals
play it. The disruption in general is
Yeah,
good.
the removal in black is very good. It's also like white starts really, really good and then tapers off like a cliff. Black, the removal pool is actually quite deep. There's like many,
sure.
There's
I
many
understand.
kill spells that are of roughly equal quality. Black also gets access to all the best hand attack in the game, so you have disruption there as well.
I was going to say that I think that's the biggest reason for playing black-based aggro is, as opposed to anything else, is that you get to play Delirium Schemes.
Nobody plays that.
They do.
I'm sorry.
Jared's played that card.
What
That
is
card's
Delirium
sick.
Schemes?
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's better than Suspend Mindstab.
I
me about
kept
tell me this
thinking
card.
about playing this card, and I was like, "There's no way this card is too dirty."
Delirium
It's too
Schemes is
bad.
a sorcery for 2 and a black, and it says each player discards 3 cards. Now, when you cast this on turn 3 with an empty hand, it reads, target opponent discards 3 cards.
This is seriously playable. I
Yeah,
hummed
for
and
sure.
hawed
This
over
is
this card for
opposite
ages, and I was
recall.
like,
Yeah, this card's great.
Anti-recall?
It's better than Suspend Mindstab, Fury Charm, your Mindstab.
I have got to get a copy
That
of
is
this.
certainly true. But the bar not high on that one.
No, not as such.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you power out a bunch of threats.
Yeah,
it's
and
like,
so when I say that the deck gets to play Delirium Schemes, I mean that's after you already get to play Duress, Thoughtseize, Inquisition of Kozilek,
Him.
him,
Twist.
Blackmail, Encroach,
Yeah.
Mind Twist.
Wrench Mind.
your
Wrenched Mind.
collective brutality is way
Yeah.
higher
Yeah.
up that list.
You also get access.
Sounds like we're making a discard list.
Yeah, you also get access to, and there's some risk associated with it, but the creature-based hand attack spells. So,
Harsh
Mesmeric
Scrutiny,
Fiend.
Fiend.
Despise.
Kitesail Freebooter is hot.
okay, Kite Scale
new.
Freebooter, that's some
Yeah,
some
Kitesail
hotness.
Freebooter.
yeah.
It's actually like outclassed Brain Maggot and Mesmeric Fiend.
Yeah,
Very
It's a
handily.
little different because it doesn't take creatures, but
it's
no,
still pretty spicy.
but it has evasion, which is kind of hot.
yeah, it's definitely really good.
I think one other thing that's worth noting about black-based aggro decks is that, especially the mono black, but even when you splash another color, you get to play some reasonable recovery cards as well. So
Oh,
like
recursion.
Yeah.
well, recursion, but also like in mono black, you get to play cards like Necropotence, where you really
want
get
to draw a
to
lot of cards.
right. You can embody Dark Confidant, right? Like greatness at any cost. You can pay a significant cost, and mono black is really good in metagames where no one else is trying to pressure each other's life totals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you just get to leverage so much
Oh
advantage.
boy,
from that.
can you pressure your own life total.
Yeah, because and it's worse. Like mono black against mono red is like a rough matchup to say
Yeah.
the least. It's
Yeah.
hard, and that's part of why green black became a popular deck, or black green is a better way of describing it. It's base black and you splash green because
I had a lot of fun putting this together. I've actually tried it both ways, like base green splashing back black, base black splashing green. They're both good. I
Yeah.
don't know which one is better.
just sorry, yeah, what were you saying?
Because what I discovered was base green, you get to play more of the like double green aggro cards that tend to have like a whole lot of power. So I'm talking stuff like Avatar the Resolute,
Strangleroot Geist.
Strangleroot Geist, even like Garrick's Companion.
Scavenging Ooze.
Well,
That's
you
not
play that
double
anyway.
green, though.
Okay. Oh,
But-
sorry, double green. Yeah.
On the flip side, on black, you play kind of weirdo threats like Vampire Hexmage, which is 2/1 with first strike that can just kill planeswalkers.
Withered Wretch.
Withered Wretch?
Exiles cards from the graveyard.
Yeah.
Oh,
one is
right.
Withered
The
Wretch?
card's actively good. Black
Yeah.
black for a 2/2 that has a one colorless mana or one generic mana ability that exiles
What's
a
that
card.
2/3 with
Possibly.
lifelink and death touch?
Gifted Aetherborn.
Gifted
Oh, that card's
yeah,
really
that card's
good.
really
So
good.
Tony Nighthawk.
Tony.
Nighthawk.
Yeah.
Also, like if you go black based, you can play sort of cards like Snuff Out, which rely on you having a swamp.
And
It's
also
like a kill spell you can
life
cast.
that you don't care about.
Yeah, it's very, very good. But yeah, splashing green tends to shore up a bunch of the inherent weaknesses of mono black, because mono black has no way to interact with artifacts or enchantments. None at all.
Well-
Don't talk to me about Gate to Phyrexia.
Can I interest you in word of commanding your opponent?
No! Adding green gets you access to like Maelstrom Pulse,
Abrupt
Decay, Reclamation Sage,
Yeah.
a bunch of other stuff. And also, like, green-black has this wonderful sort of stubbornness to it in its creature quality. So, stuff like Dragmangler, or, you have stuff like Pack Rat. You can maybe sometimes slide even...
Gravecrawler.
Gravecrawler. Stuff that, like, can get killed but just come right back. So it's like getting more gas in the long game.
Scrapheap Scrounger is a recent
Yeah,
card
Scrapheap
that's
Scrounger is
super
great.
great in that archetype.
This is the sort of archetype that you can play stuff like Unearth in, or I will often jam Reanimate.
Yeah.
Sweet.
The card's sick. You just like get a creature back. It's one black. Unearth is one black sorcery. Choose a creature card in your graveyard with CMC 3 or less and put it into play. It also cycles for two generic.
Yeah.
And
That card,
Reanimate,
this card's super underplayed.
it's very good. Great art too. Reanimate is one black. Get a creature from any graveyard, put it into play. You lose life equal to its life total.
Converted mana cost.
To its CMC. So you can use this to hit your own like low drop guys that have died. Get them back, pay a couple life, or after you've hand attacked them,
You live the
get
dream.
you live the dream.
Yeah.
Get their Inferno Titan. It's like I'm taking 6 to the face, but you're taking 12.
Or since you're largely playing unconditional removal, if somebody plays a big creature against you, you can often kill it and then
Take it.
It's like
Take
nice
it.
creature, idiot.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about aggro in the metagame. So what role does aggro play in a healthy metagame?
So aggro is essentially the police.
Yeah, that's literally what I was gonna say.
Perfect. So lots of people, mostly me, we like to powerfully do nothing. That is my favorite way to play Magic. Exactly. And if aggro didn't exist, oh boy, would I powerfully do nothing.
Yeah.
But sadly, aggro is there to make sure that decks don't just get to sit there and play around with 5-color mana bases and 7-drop planeswalkers and get to win tournaments.
Like Jer and I for the last 2 tournaments have played the same deck. Which is like this 5-color Hermit Druid pod deck. It's really sweet, actually. Jer came up with it. I think it's a good innovation. And I played against Mono Red on Thursday. And of course, Hermit Druid requires you to play no basic lands in your deck because its activated ability flips cards until you hit a basic, but you're just using it to mill yourself. And so I played against Mono Red, and I was at like 15 or 16, and I was like, yeah, I'm probably winning this game.
They price of progress for 80 or whatever.
No, they priced me for 12, and then they fire blasted me all on the same turn, and I died.
You took 16 in a base in 1 turn.
For 2 mana.
2 mana, yeah. But
Amazing.
But it was like one of those situations where it's like, I can't really be mad, right? Like my mana base was 6 non-basics, and I was not here to play fair Magic.
Yeah,
let's be honest, right? Like I was here to mill my whole deck and kill people.
Yeah, there's a cost to everything in Magic.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so aggro being around means that decks like that have to at least take it into account. Like we were talking about, you need to have aggro in the metagame in order to have a healthy metagame. You don't want people to just keep trying to go greedier and greedier with their deck construction. Like Jared said, like powerfully doing nothing is fun for some, but you want to make sure that it's not the only thing you can be doing.
Yeah.
And aggro is really good for bringing that back down, right? Like every now and then you can kind of like diagnose when the room is ripe to play an aggro deck, right? People have been gradually getting greedier and greedier, and you just can show up with mono red and sweep through the
It's
tournament.
like these 4-color decks have become fatted with their success.
Too
It's time to
complacent.
knock them down a peg or 5.
So perfect. Let's talk some quick pros and cons here. So you're an aggro deck. What are you bringing? Why are you playing aggro?
Gotta go fast.
Yep.
The biggest reason for me to play aggro is it's super consistent. If you show up, sometimes in some matchups, literally all you have to do is show up. Like
Yeah, you get the most free wins with this
largely
deck.
when you play against me with an aggro deck, I don't stand much of a chance of winning.
All right. What are the cons of aggro decks? Like why? If you're looking at aggro and you're like, maybe why shouldn't I play this? What are the reasons for that?
Aggro is definitely, of the archetypes, it is the most vulnerable to getting meta'd out of the game. If people are preparing for aggro, it's one of the more beatable strategies. You'll note not a lot of aggro cards are points, and that's because you can't really meaningfully point aggro in a way which feels fair, but B, the solution to aggro is not the deck is too good, we need to make the deck less good. It's you just need to build your deck differently.
Yeah, it's like play more walls, idiot.
Yeah. And
Kitchen
so,
finks is-
so what can happen is, as Jer said, sometimes you're going to sit down at the table and all you had to do was sit down and draw 7, and you're more or less going to win. But similarly, there are going to be times where you sit down across from the person playing Leyline of Sanctity and Moat, and you're going to die.
That's this guy.
I mean, maybe this is just one of those like 80-20 decks in both orientation.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't think it's quite that bad, but
No. I think aggro has like some 70-30 matchups, a bunch of like close to 50-50 matchups, and like the odd 30-70 matchup.
yeah.
And the occasional 100-0.
Well, yeah, that's when you draw.
Well,
like,
that sure against Jer and I.
Yeah. And myself a lot of the time. Let's be honest. Anybody have any closing statements on aggro before we move on to our closing segments?
seems
It gets a bad rap. It's more fun and harder to play than almost everyone gives it credit for.
Yeah, I think as a closing thought, the idea that only new players or inexperienced plays aggro, I think is very false. I think it has an incredibly high skill ceiling to it. And the players who are really good at it are some of the best players in Magic.
Certainly true.
Yeah. All right, let's go on to our closing segment. Powerful Magic. Oh, we got music now, too. Up to date.
Soon we're going to get in harmony. It's going to happen. Just you wait.
The Powerful Magic story for today is me. And this is a story kind of fitting where I'm actually doing powerful nothing. If you want to play an archetype that does nothing, you should explore Enchantress.
Oh boy.
Yeah, also known as the Pillow Fort.
I
where
saw somebody else playing Enchantress the other night.
it's been a while, and I'm excited to see if it comes back again. So an Enchantress is a format where you spend the first 8 turns trying desperately not to die. Like, you don't even think at any point until about turn 14 of, like, how do I win? It's always like fog, wall, like anything you can to keep your opponent from hurting you. And it gets even harder because not all answers in Enchantress work against all decks. So do you tutor for your moat, or do you tutor for Leyline of Sanctity, or against RDW, do you need both? Like, it's hard. So I'm playing against an aggro deck, and I'm dead. I'm basically so dead. They have lethal on the board. I have an Omniscience in play. I've done a lot of powerful nothing. My hand is empty, and I'm like, all right, this game is basically over. I think there's literally one card in my entire deck that saves me right now. Can I get it? And I'm having this conversation with my opponent, and they're like, let's see it. And it's one of those moments where you don't even draw it in slow roll. You just lift off the top of your deck and you slam it. And I ripped Emrakul off the top.
Which one?
Oh, the 15 mana one. This was before we returned to the Eldrazi. So Emrakul, the last Aeon, I believe is the Aeon's Torn, pardon me. 15 mana, 15/15, cannot be countered. When you cast Emrakul, take an extra turn, flying, protection from colored spells, Annihilator 6, and if it would be put into your graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it away. This card is insane.
It's the flying spaghetti monster.
And very, very, very hard to cast, but luckily I had an Omniscience in play, which is a 10 or
so
11?
she was free.
11.
An 11 mana enchantment for 8 blue that says you can just cast spells for free.
7 blue.
7. We lied. God.
Oh, 10 mana enchantment.
Maybe
so
is it Enter that costs 11?
Enter the Infinite?
Yeah,
that
let's
goes.
enter the infinite.
So not only do I get to put Emrakul into play for free, but I also get the cast, get another turn, which puts my opponent off from killing me. They have not enough permanence to survive the Annihilator because they're on an aggro deck.
Annihilator is so devastating.
Yeah, Annihilator is whenever you attack, they have to sacrifice X permanence equal to the Annihilator cost. Emrakul
Before they
notably,
even think about blocking you.
Emrakul notably has Annihilator 6. So it's just one of those moments where you're like, well, I've got one out. Heart of the cards.
Got it.
You know,
What do you know? That was it.
Yeah, game of skill, no luck involved. May the best wizard win.
Best wizard always wins, I'll have you know.
Ooh, what's that art?
That's the RP2Q promo. Do you
Really?
need one? I know someone who's in the market to get rid of one.
I don't know. I tend to be more OG,
Fair enough.
like original printing on everything.
The person's not me, by the way. It's someone much better at Magic than I am.
Yeah, nice passive voice. No, just joking. Anyways, friends, that's our episode for today. I hope you enjoyed watching. We appreciate you watching our videos. We also couldn't do this without your support on the Patreon at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. We literally couldn't do this without that. It supports not only this podcast, but everything else on the Loading Ready Run content network thing. Anyways, from us to you, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Surprise post-credit bonus episode. Serge, what's your dumb deck?
What? Oh, the
Shop
the
aggro.
workshop weenie one?
Oh, yeah. We definitely didn't talk about this.
Someone's going to ask about
All
us.
right,
You better just explain it real
All right,
quick.
Workshop Weenie is it's basically Affinity. It didn't work for the longest time. It's as many low-cost artifacts as possible, and the one card that pulls it all together is not a budget option. It's Mishra's Workshop. It's a land that taps and adds 3 colorless mana to your mana pool, but that mana can only be used to cast artifacts. You can't even use it to equip artifacts with it. And so you are all in. This is the deck that tries to abuse your mulligans. It tries to put out all the fast mana and dump your hand as quickly as possible. I have a lot of fun. I built it for a while. I played it on stream. It's
I was gonna say.
beautiful. It is not a budget option.
No.
Yeah, the website I'm looking at here has a median price of $1,000.
pretty good.
There's an advantage to having
For
played
just
Magic.
workshop, not the whole deck.
Yeah.
For this card.
There's an advantage to having been playing Magic for a very long time, is that you oops into acquiring expensive cards before they got expensive.
Yup.
Like foil Thoughtseize.
Like the foil Lorwyn Thoughtseize that I
much
apparently found out was worth $1 bajillion as well.
It's like $400 US.
I got it for $25. Yeah, I mean, I was playing during
Powerful
Bowling. Anyways,
Magic.
I'll post a list for that. We'll make sure to include a bunch of other just like samples from the archetype and everything. Thank you, Graham, for the post credits.
You're gonna get
Yeah, I know.
You're going to get letters if you don't talk about it.
Yeah,
The
it's true.
people are going to write letters. That's true.
Exactly.
I'll have to
Angry
read them.
tweets.
Thanks again and goodbye.